and gentlemen, MrCropper here. I believe we are live. Yes, very good. Okay. So, we're going to be doing a little bit of Ari Armstrong. Here. I believe we are live. Yes, very good. Okay. Oh, of course that would happen. Now, I'll put that there. We have got this guy whose initials are A. His first name happens to be the same. Does his first name really have to be Ayn Rand Institute, ARI? But it is. It is. Now we're going to skip 14 minutes into his talk. And I've listened up to about 20 or 25 or something in here. And this area here is, he claims it's his most substantive area. But we're going to start there to spare us the beginning. And we're going to make it all the way to the end before we're done with this.
So what do I think is wrong with Ayn Rand's approach to ethics? Now, I want to point out, right, I think that she deserves a great deal of credit for pointing out the moral significance of survival, which is something that, to my knowledge, no other philosopher prior to her spends much any attention on, right? But it's actually profoundly important. I mean, after all, if you're not alive, you can't pursue any value whatsoever. So that automatically makes it profoundly important, right? And obviously, a great many of our values do directly feed our survival. We're all eating food, drinking water, right? We all have shelter over our heads to keep ourselves warm. We exercise, go to the doctor, right? Countless things we do through the course of our day is directly related to keeping ourselves healthy and alive. And so I think Rand is right to point out the moral significance of that. Nevertheless, I don't think that it's the fundamental as Rand has it.
Now, in what sense is it fundamental? In what sense is life fundamental? I mean, I'm thinking of Galt's speech where he says, if you choose to live, then you only have one choice, and that is to choose to live as a rational animal and use your mind. You have no claws, etc. You have no instincts. You have no wings. So that's the quote that I think of when I think of this. So in that sense, choosing to live is just the first. It's very fundamental. It's kind of like, it's fundamental in the way that metaphysics and epistemology are fundamental. It just gets everything started. We don't go around every day worrying about the fact that, whether or not things exist and whether or not we have a mind, unless we're Sam Harris. The rest of us just get on with life. And you don't go around worrying about and analyzing everything from the viewpoint of keeping yourself alive. You just accept that life is your goal, and then you get on with it. Now, what kind of life is your goal? That's what objectivism is all about. Not staying alive. Staying alive is, you could find a situation where you wouldn't want to stay alive. And let's be honest, everybody dies. Everybody dies. So you might be in a situation one day when you're facing cancer or a long prison sentence or something like this, and you say, well, time's up. I don't want to go through that. So you do whatever. Now, that's up to the individual to judge whether or not they want to suffer through something, and whether or not they've already finished what they want to do. So if enjoyment and happiness is the value that we live for, then choosing life is what gets us started. But life itself is just what makes valuing possible, see? So, I'm not going to go and say life's not a value. That's not where I would go. I would say life makes values possible. And for him to equate life itself as a value in Rand's system is, well, we've just seen how strange it is.
Moral significance of that. Nevertheless, I don't think that it's the fundamental as Rand has it. And so here I can only again.
Now, there we go. He doesn't think it's as fundamental as Rand has it. And so what I'm suggesting, I guess, is he's probably going to say that it is more fundamental than he probably thinks that Rand is thinking that it's more fundamental than it is. It's extremely fundamental, but it doesn't say very much. It just says that if you choose to live, then that is the background choice, to choose to live. And if that is your choice, to choose to live, then that gives you a way to measure your other choices. So we'll see. We'll see how fundamental he thinks. I think that he's going to say that it's fundamental in a rationalistic way, in a floating Platonic way. Everything is measured against, oh, life this, life that. Let's see.
Hit some highlights, right? I can't present my complete case. I can present some short versions of some of my arguments. But here's my.
All right, he's only got 45 minutes left here, so he's only going to do some short versions of some of his arguments. I assume he's picked his best stuff here, right?
Here's my main argument. We experience some things as valuable for their own sake, as ends in themselves, and not as further means to survive. That's my main argument. Okay, that's fine.
So there are some things we seek as an end in themselves and not because they help us survive. While he was saying that, you know, I'm sitting here surrounded by things that don't necessarily help me survive, but I enjoy them. I've got works of art on the wall. I've got an electronic cigarette in my hand. I've got a glass of, you know, for argument's sake, I have a beer or some wine here. I don't. I actually quit drinking. But for argument's sake, I've got a glass of wine here at my elbow, and I'm enjoying my evening. And those things don't necessarily contribute to life, do they? So there we go. He wants everything that you do to make you healthier and stronger and make sure you live longer. Absolutely everything you do is to keep you healthy and strong and make you live long. Now, I would just stop Ari right here. Stop him right in his tracks and say, why would you want to live? What is the purpose of living? Why would you want to live longer or healthier or better? Why? What is the purpose of that? Now, of course, the objectivists are going to say happiness. Now, the objectivists don't harp on happiness as much as I think they should. Aristotle, maybe they do, but Aristotle does such a good job that I give him absolutely 100% credit in the Nicomachean Ethics, not for outlining every single perfect thing about ethics that needed to be outlined, but doing some very, very good work and some heavy lifting and getting happiness situated as the goal of a rational man's life. Unarguably, that is the situation still. Everybody cannot argue with Aristotle's statements in the Nicomachean Ethics. Go ahead and try. Okay, why am I off on Aristotle? Let's get back to Ari here.
As valuable for their own sake, as ends in themselves, and not as further means to survive. That's my main argument. Okay, that's my main objection to Rand's theory.
His main objection is that there are. Now, if that's his main objection, if that's his biggest beef with Rand, I'm going to go back 20 seconds and let him give a run up. This is his biggest beef.
So here's my main argument. We experience some things as valuable for their own sake, as ends in themselves, and not as further means to survive. That's my main argument. Okay, that's my main objection to Rand's theory.
Okay, destroyed. Ari, destroyed, weak, very weak. You're just viewing it like some sort of Platonistic rationalist who thinks that every time you pick up a fork to eat, you say, am I picking this fork up in a way that's going to make me live longer? You know, I mean, that's just stupid. Why would you want to live longer? So you're going to evaluate absolutely everything, all your values based on whether or not they contribute to living longer. Now, I'm just filling in living longer as the thing, because he's not saying living life fully as his thing, is he? Which is what the objectivists would say. Now, the objectivists would not tell you not to get in a car and drive down the road, right? I mean, some objectivists might, sure, you go ahead and find me one. But it's not in their philosophy that thou shalt not drive down the road because it's dangerous and thou could die. So thou should not go where thou could die. That's ridiculous. And objectivists would never say that you shouldn't go to war if your country is attacked or something. Objectivists would never say that you should if somebody tries to mug you on the street or something like that. So objectivists would not be in a situation the danger carefully and do what's rational to try to preserve yourself. But they would not tell you not to drive a car because it's dangerous. Yes, you might die in a car wreck. That's true. So what do you think about that, Ari? Therefore, no objectivists would ever get in cars because of the chance that they could die in a car wreck, and they do everything for life, right? Is that what his argument would be? What do you say to that, Ari?
And if this is true, if it's true that we experience some things as valuable for their own sake and not as means to survival, and that just means that Rand's theory is wrong.
Well, then you're wrong about that. We've just destroyed that. So do you have anything else? Or you can come back at me if you want on that, sir.
So let me point out, I'll give you a few examples. Right? The first one, because it's very visceral and easy to discuss, having sex with a loving partner. I'm going to argue that we experience that as an end in itself.
We do experience physical pleasure as an end in itself, and the emotional pleasure of sex and whatever as an end in itself. True. All action, every single human action has one ultimate end, and that's happiness. So the question is, how would you get to this magical thing called happiness to which all human action is aimed? And the answer to that is, well, you have to be alive. So start there. Make sure you're alive and make sure you preserve your life. And then inside of that fact, that's not a value frame, that's just a fact. Inside of that fact, you can set up your value frame to preserve and enhance that life. But the life is just the fact that makes values possible. He's confusing it all and making life the supreme value. Life is the background that makes values possible. Happiness is the supreme value. Let's see him take happiness apart, because that's what he really should be doing if he wants to take apart Rand's supreme value. It's happiness. So two lovers making love does not contribute to their own long-term existence. No, it contributes to their happiness. What kind of stupid man are you?
Now, it's also true that sex normally has health benefits, right? So it does serve your survival.
See? We're going to actually analyze sex as being physical exercise or something like that, akin to physical exercise. Really? That's how stupid you get when you go down this road. This is pretty bad. Is this guy one of the best that's out there against Ayn Rand? Is this all we have to fight? Is people like this? We win.
That's so great. Does both things, right? You're a sexual altruist. But so here's a very quick dog.
What did that guy say? He just said something like he lays there, he doesn't get exercise, she does all the work, something like that.
Just to get you thinking about.
Or he does all the work, she doesn't get any exercise, something like that. That would be the joke, right? Sexual altruist.
What's really the fundamental motivation here, right? Let's say you learned that you had a condition. Every time you had sex, you were going to shorten your life by 1 minute. I mean, most people would not stop having sex. Right? They would still have a lot of. They might cut it down somewhat. They're like, Thursdays, I'm going to take Thursday, something. But right, but I think that indicates, right, this is not the kind of thing. We're not doing this solely or fundamentally for our survival benefit.
All right. Well, why we're not doing it solely or fundamentally for our survival benefit? Surviving as what? Surviving as what? We are doing it fundamentally for our survival benefit. It's weird that he tags that word on there. We're not doing it for our survival, Ari. We're doing it for our survival benefit, for the benefit of our surviving, so that we survive in a better and happier way. So, so there we go. There we go.
We're doing it because we experience it as an end in itself, and we actually pursue our survival largely as a means to these values of experiences in themselves.
All right. Well, if you start to understand that that's Rand's position, that we survive first, and then we can have values because we're alive. If you start to understand that that's Rand's position, then you'll be starting to get somewhere. He seems to grasp a bit of that.
Here's a quick list of some other examples. Having and raising a child. Listening to a piece of fine music.
Wait, having and raising a child isn't selfish then? Listening to, or it's an end in itself then. It's an end in itself that's joyous by itself? Well, now how would that say that we shouldn't have children? So if you have children, just having children by itself is a reward, period, full stop. If that's his assertion, the children, you know, you'd have to have them rational being. That's not true. Having children isn't a value by itself, full stop. But having children certainly can fit within the objectivist ethics if you are rational, raise your children in a rational way and love them and care for them and so forth and respect them as human beings. That's really strange. Having a child, how does he have that on his list? Garbage.
Here's a quick list of some other examples. Having and raising a child. Listening to a piece of fine music.
Listening to a piece of fine music is an end in itself that we don't save up and use for something else, right? Well, Ari, that should have given you a hint right there. The objectivists understand you can sit and listen to a piece of fine music. That should have given you a hint right there. Who the hell are you arguing against? Who are you arguing for? Who is he trying to fool here with a garbage argument like this? He doesn't really think this is a substantive argument, does he? Ari, do you really think this is a substantive argument? Who are you trying to fool? What the hell is going on here? This is stupid.
Watching a beautiful sunset. Reading a finely written work.
What? Looking at a beautiful sunset? Reading a fine work of literature? Oi, polloi. So objectivists can't value these because they don't contribute to living? What is that? They don't contribute to being alive? Oh, God. These are the beautiful things of life. He's listing the things that objectivists would list as values. Great works of literature like Atlas Shrugged, for example. Oh, boy. Weak case. Is this the best they have? This is one of their worst. Who else? What else? All right. If anybody knows of anybody else who's attacking Ayn Rand, please tell me. This guy is garbage.
Things can be experienced as ends in themselves and not as further means of survival. Now, I want to emphasize this point as my second point in this sequence. This point about children, right? I think it's extremely implausible that people normally have children to further their own survival. I'm a parent now, right? And it seems just wildly implausible to me. But this is really the point of it. This is what it actually accomplishes.
Well, not anymore. But up until 100 years ago, you did. You had kids so that they could help you on the farm because 90% of people lived on farms up until the year 1905 or something like that, or 1880 or something. So until very, very recently, and for all of human history before that, you had children to help you survive. Now, that's probably why it's so rewarding to have them. It's so wired into us to be rewarded to have them, because the people who don't have them didn't survive and didn't pass their genes on, right? So the people who do have children like their children. Now, maybe there's a bit of circular logic in that, but certainly self-reinforcing systems are what evolution is built on. So he's just missing the boat entirely. This is sort of silly for me to try to argue one way or the other when he is just thrashing out in the middle of nowhere. He has no idea what he's talking about.
So this is especially obvious if you look before the advance of modern medicine. For women, getting pregnant, having a child was extremely dangerous.
Oh, please. Everything was dangerous. Everybody died of everything all the time. People didn't live past the age of 30. An old man was 40 or 50 back then. Oh, please. Can you imagine a woman back then saying, no, I don't want to have sex because I don't want to get pregnant because it's dangerous. I might die. What else are you going to do with your life? You live in a mud hut. You're starving to death. Half of your neighborhood's starving to death and the other half are insane and go worship some garbage all the time. And your society's garbage and everybody's starving to death. Of course you don't care about trying to, what's she going to try to live so old that she can retire in Florida or something? They had a totally different way of life, and they did not have a very high quality of life, Ari.
So this is especially obvious if you look before the advance of modern medicine. For women, getting pregnant, having a child was extremely dangerous. You had a very good chance of dying from this experience. Okay. So what would that's like saying men wouldn't go out into the field because there were snakes they could be bitten by. There were spiders that
men didn't go hunting because the chance that the animal would attack them back, or that while they're running after the animal, they'd trip and fall and hit their head. So therefore, these are very dangerous things. So men don't do those things. Well, one of the things that just goes along with being a woman happens to be that you have babies. So I think that's just nonsense. I think that evaluating it from, women want to get pregnant. They want it. They get baby hungry when they see little babies, right? We've heard of this phenomenon. Oi polloi. All right. If that's the best he can do, then that's the best he can do.
I could say to somebody back then, well, you should try everything you can to not get pregnant because it's obviously contrary to your survival.
Yeah. Try again. Next example.
That's kind of a difficult case to make. I think it doesn't quite ring the right way.
Yeah.
But even today, it can be quite dangerous. My wife got severe preeclampsia just prior to childbirth. She had to do an emergency C-section. Now, today we have good medical treatment, so maternal death rates, young child death rates are radically lower than they once were, which is great. But this stuff, these kind of diseases still kill women every year, even in the United States. So why is it that people do and should have children? To further their own survival, I'm arguing no, because we experience...
For happiness, for their own enjoyment, that's why.
Children bring enormous benefit to our lives and enormous value to our lives, but because we're experiencing this as valuable for its own sake and so on.
If, ladies and gentlemen, just on a side note, if you don't have a purpose in life, you don't know what your purpose in life is, but you're rational and you love yourself and you respect yourself and you respect other people, I'm telling you that having children, having a child, gives you a purpose. Because even when you despair and even when you say, what the hell, I'll just give up. Who cares? Why do I care? Why does anything matter? Wait a minute. I can't act like that. Somebody's counting on me. Somebody who has no idea how terrible the world is yet, or how mean it can be. Somebody who has no idea how beautiful and wonderful life can and will be, and she'll never appreciate any of that, and she won't get a proper view of it unless I give it to her. So if you don't have a purpose in life, children can give you a reason to get through the day, or they can give you a reason to not even contemplate not getting through the next day. Or at least that's how it works for me.
Okay, another general line of argument, the biology. I'm going to say that Rand's biology is simply mistaken. So here's a quick line from the Objectivist Ethics. The functions of all living things are directed to a single goal, the maintenance of the organism's life.
The functions of all living things are directed to a single goal, the maintenance of... Now, what's that? The functions. That's your intestines and stuff, and your heart and stuff, the functions.
And if you're interested, there's an entire book that's basically on that theme. It's by Harry Benswanger, written long ago, and it's called The Biological Basis of Teleological Concepts. And it's largely just about that point. But I'll just give you a few examples that I think readily disproves her basic biological claim. So there's something called a macrophagous spider. Macrophagous means mother eating. Why is it called that? Because after the spider lays its eggs, then its body turns mushy and all the little spiderlings eat her up alive. Okay? So is reproduction a function aimed toward the survival of the mother spider?
Was Ayn Rand talking about spiders? We might need to expand our discussion a little bit here, Ari. We might have to talk about DNA and genes here. We might have to talk about the individuality of human beings and why they are unique and why they deserve a place in our philosophy, and there's not a single animal on the planet that rises to the level of deserving a place in the philosophy that affords rights to sentient beings. And spiders are a weird example, Ari. I'm not sure. Boy, I'm not sure. What's his basis for this? Is it really as stupid? Can I really hand wave right now, or do I need to make a little bit better of an argument against it? Because I want to just hand wave and go, that's stupid, Ari. Are you kidding me? I'm going to go back 32 seconds. I'm going to try to follow his chain of thought and see if he's got something a little deeper going on than what I see. And if not, this is pretty bad.
And it's called The Biological Basis of Teleological Concepts. and it's largely just about that point. But I'll just give you a few examples that I think readily disproves her basic biological claim. So there's something called
basic biological point was her basic bio was right before that
for experiencing
guy
this
drank
is
coffee.
valuable for its own sake. Okay, another general line of argument, the biology. I'm going to say that Rand's biology is simply mistaken. So here's a quick line from the objective sentence.
Okay, here we go. This is it. So think of the spider laying its eggs and then dying, and its body being eaten by the baby spiders. First of all, I'd ask Ari, what plans did you have for this spider? What else was it supposed to do? It was driven by automatic instinct. It had no choice in the matter. It doesn't have free will. It couldn't choose to go be a lawyer or something, or retire and die of a nice old age instead of giving birth. It was destined to do this by its genes, and it's insofar as the spider had any desires at all, it desired this. But this is not applicable to human beings and how human beings live. And this is only applicable in the largest or thinnest or farthest sense that spiders are alive and humans are alive. But other than that, there's virtually nothing similar. Okay, so here we are. I'm sorry. Think about the spider and think about it dying or whatever. Now here we go.
The functions of all living things are directed to a single goal, the maintenance of the organism's life.
So the fact that a spider dies, let me see. Okay, this is what happens then. The spider lives a long, happy life, and then it dies. Now, at the very end there, when it dies, eggs are released and the cycle continues. All right, Ari, can we look at it that way? Can we look at it that way? That spider's not sacrificing itself. It's lived its life. That is its death. Its death happens to coincide with the birth of its next generation. What if we look at it that way? What if it's not sacrificing itself? What if it's not giving up a nice luxury home in Southern California and the life of a lawyer? All right, that's I think the best he can do, and I don't know if we can answer him any better than that, because what a silly thing.
And if you're interested, there's an entire book that's basically on that theme. It's by Harry Benswanger, written long ago, and it's called The Biological Basis of Teleological Concepts, and it's largely just about that point. But I'll just give you a few examples that I think readily disproves her basic biological claim. So there's something called a matrophagous spider. Matrophagous means mother eating. Why is it called that? Because after the spider lays its eggs, then its body turns mushy and all the little spiderlings eat her up alive. Okay? So is reproduction a function aimed toward the survival of the mother spider? I'm going to say, go out and live here and say no. Right, but this is not, it's a dramatic example, right?
It's at the very end of the spider's life. And that is the spider's death. The spider's death is defined by its reproduction.
But it's hardly the exception of the rule. It's an illustration of the rule. Generally speaking, individual members of species put a great deal of resources into reproduction of their genes, not just their personal survival. They do both, right? But it's the reproduction of their genes. So just another couple quick examples. The male praying mantis. When the male praying mantis has sex, he stands a good chance of getting his head bitten off by the female. When the female is done with him, she will then eat him up, which is great for her, obviously for her survival and the survival of the offspring.
Well, that's just like a guy riding a motorcycle down the highway. He doesn't want to live without getting on that bike, or somebody going out in the woods and hunting. He doesn't. Yeah, other people are out there hunting, and stray bullets could fly. Things do happen. So he thinks none of those people would ever do any of that. Well, the praying mantis is in that situation. He wants to get laid so bad, and so he does. So there's that's so. Sometimes we do things that are dangerous, and the praying mantis doesn't know any better, or what. And then I want to ask Ari, is this really applicable to objectivist ethics, Ari? Really, praying mantises? Like, I'm like descending to your level of stupidity to even discuss this, okay? You are making everybody dumber who talks to you and hears about this, okay? I am struggling not to lose an IQ point while we discuss this, okay? This is so stupid. Praying mantises have nothing to do with objectivist ethics, okay? Holy moly.
Not so good for the male praying mantis. Bees will sacrifice themselves for the hive. Parent birds will often try to divert a predator away from their nest, which is dangerous to the parent birds. These are not...
Now, those birds aren't really acting willfully, are they? Do you think that they're acting with free will, Ari? Of course they're not. They're acting out of instinct. Now, it's easy to see why they have those instincts, because if they didn't have those instincts, then they wouldn't be alive. Something would have eaten their young, and those birds would be extinct. They'd be gone. The only birds that exist are the ones that have instincts for survival and for protecting their nest and blah, blah, blah. You know? So it's no mystery why they have those. They exist because they have them, and they have them because they exist. And this is not relevant. What is the title of this goddamn video? Is Ayn Rand's Objectivist Ethics, and he's talking about spiders and praying mantises and the idea that sex is an end in itself and therefore not a value to objectivists because it doesn't promote life. Oh my God. Oh, the poor people who sat in this room and had to look at this guy as if this was a serious situation. I would have jumped up and, oh my God, I would have rioted. I would have rioted if I was there.
Rare exception, right? This is the rule that individual organisms spend efforts on the reproduction of their genes, not just their personal survival. So in biology, values orient to the survival of the genes, not survival. Now, I want to emphasize here.
What was that confused little sentence there? I'm going to slow it down. We're going fast.
Will often try to divert a predator away from their nest, which is dangerous to the parent bird. These are not rare exceptions, right? This is the rule that individual organisms spend efforts on the reproduction of their genes, not just their personal survival. So in biology, values...
Not just on personal survival. All right, well, you haven't said anything about human beings. It's funny how he's avoiding human beings. He's talking about objectivist ethics, right? The ethics that human beings live by. And he's discussing lots of stuff, but not human beings.
Is oriented to the survival of the genes. These are not rare exceptions, right? This is the rule that individual organisms spend efforts on the reproduction of their genes, not just their personal survival. So in biology, values orient to the survival of the genes, not survival. Now, I want to emphasize.
Values are oriented to the survival of the genes, not to survival itself. Well, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that you have quite a few drives and urges which are aimed at the survival of your genes, not necessarily the survival of yourself. And objectivists are able to think about this without their head blowing up. In fact, I have a little poem for you. If happiness is difficult obtained, recall the reason that humans are so strained. As Darwin pointed out, we are evolved to reproduce. No further problem solved. So as far as your sex drive goes, it really doesn't care what happens after. Your sex drive really just wants the event to occur. And then your sex drive's out of it. And then you take control after that. You are in control, or whoever is pregnant. So your sex drive really isn't in it for the long haul with you. It's just there to get the job done. Now, objectivists can understand that. We can realize what it's for. We can wear condoms. We can have a lot of kids if we want. But it doesn't have to make our head explode to realize that we are an animal. Now, Ari, Mr. Armstrong, sir, animals don't have anything else. They are only that, okay? In fact, Ayn Rand mentions the terrible, mindless type of existence that is pre-industrial or something like that. She describes it as the pre-industrial, animalistic, animal-like existence of of reproduction, of being pregnant all the time, etc. So she mentions animals as being below the moral state of humans. So this is really, really bizarre to analyze insects, to analyze insects while in a video about objectivist ethics. This is beyond bizarre.
Right? Because a lot of people are confused on this point. I am not saying, certainly not, that the point of ethics for human beings is to further our gene. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that's the wrong way to look at it, right?
Right. Ethics is for you to live your life. There is one detail of your life. Now it's an extremely important detail to humanity as a whole, which means to every individual in the future, every potential individual in the future. And that's your sex drive, right? But that is not the essence of your life. It's very important. Like Shakespeare said, if we stopped having babies, 60 years would make the world away. 60 years would make the world gone. And there's not really very much danger that that's going to happen, is there? We might reduce our population in the future, but people are pretty happy to reproduce, aren't they? So I guess I've gotten off the subject, possibly. Who knows what the hell his subject is?
But neither is it to pursue our survival. And so why is this relevant? When Rand talks about the relationship of values to life, in that the values normally orient to life.
Values orient to life. The relationship of values to life. Values orient to life. All right, Ari, you can't have values unless you're alive. The values that you have had ought to keep you alive. Right? Is that reasonable enough? So now, oh, you can't drive a car, it's dangerous. It wouldn't keep you alive if you got in a car wreck. Okay, just rewind and go over the bit I said earlier.
I think that the points about biology illustrate that she's just wrong about that basic relationship. I'm going to do a couple of other more derivative points here. How many of you are familiar with the term free rider problem? If you've done any economics or parts of practical ethics? Oh, not as many as I would have guessed. Well, let me just use the example of charity, which involves a free rider problem. I'll try not to use the technical language. Right? Why would an egoist, concerned with their own survival as their primary goal, be interested in giving to charity to strangers or doing things like that?
There probably wouldn't be a lot of that, maybe. So now, if people see a real need, maybe there would be. But so what if there's not a lot of that? We're talking about a free society where people have the ability to get their own job and support themselves. And I tended to think that that in a society where you couldn't just go down to the local government office and get some sort of food stamps or something, family would help family out more. And I'm thinking about when I was younger and I just got into college, and my brother and I had this apartment together, and money was tight. We were young, and we had hourly wage jobs, and talking to my mom on the phone once in a while, she was just always saying, go down to the local food stamp office, whatever it is, human services or whatever. Just go down there and get signed up for food stamps. You could get food stamps, you could get dental, you don't make enough money, you could get medical, blah, blah, blah. You could get help, Now, I never did because I can't stand bureaucrats. I don't want anything to do with it. I know that they take my money, and I know that I have every right to get some of it back if I can, but that involves dealing with the people, and I don't want to deal with them. So the point there is that my own mother, knowing that I could use some help, some extra help or some extra money, told me to go to the state. That's just the point. I'm not saying that when I was in dire need, my parents helped me. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that even your own family will tell you. And see, I believe that it should be your family's responsibility, not responsibility, but I think that you should, if you're in dire need of help, you should go to your family and friends, not to the state. And having the state down there with an office for you to go to makes it so that your family and friends kind of look at you like, what kind of idiot are you? Don't ask me. There's the state. Go to the state. They're the ones that'll help you with that. And I think that's a terrible situation. It turns us into cold people. And then when the state defaults and doesn't do something, we just walk by these people on the street and we go, you know, not my problem. State ought to be doing something. We pay a lot of money to the state to take care of that stuff. So I think it turns us into a cold society who doesn't care about other people because it's not our problem anymore. Don't we pay taxes to take care of those problems?
Be interested in giving to charity to strangers.
There we go. That's my view of charity. That's what I think would happen in a free society. It would be much more local and much more up to close individuals. And I'll tell you what, Ari, if you are worried about the poor people that would be destitute without any help and without any compassion for them, and you want to travel in a time machine to this subjectivist society and go around helping the poor people that all the selfish people are walking past on the street, if you want to do that, let me just give you an idea of walking down the street in New York versus walking down the street in, where are we going to say, Mogadishu, Africa, let's say. Okay, which place has more destitute people? Okay, and the objectivist society is going to be a society where people are wealthy and where there's so much wealth that you can actually help somebody without hurting yourself. Whereas in Mogadishu, if you try to help somebody else, you're going to give away your own dinner because you don't hardly have anything. So, the amount of abject poverty and suffering in such a society, where people can help other people without hurting themselves, the amount of suffering in such society is much less. Okay, so just don't worry so much about charity and whether or not we'll give to charity and all that goddamn bullshit. You people who worry about that so much are so damn worried about it, you go and set up some big system so that we don't have to worry about it anymore. And then you lead to the callousness and indifference that I was just mentioning.
Doing things like sacrificing or risking their lives for strangers. Why would someone give money to a charity in Africa to keep Africans alive when I could spend that money on myself to develop my own?
Please do not send any money to Africa, ladies and gentlemen. Please, it's ruining their continent, okay? China's doing a much better job by trading with them and building infrastructure. Us sending them money is stupid. They didn't know how to spend it. They didn't spend it on anything wise. It ended up in the hands of corrupt politicians and being used to purchase guns and to suppress the population and do terrible things. And then sometimes the food that we sent was sold. It was supposed to be given away. It was sold. So please, please don't send money to Africa.
Life and survival and happiness. Well, I'm going to suggest that there's not...
But if there's any goods from Africa that you value, definitely buy those. Problem is there aren't, right?
For really, ultimately, a very good reason. Now, there's a lot of types of charity that you could plausibly argue is good for the egoist to get to. But I'm going to argue that there's a lot of types of charity that's just, it's hard to make the case that the egoist, as Rand lays it out, is really going to spend much, if any, attention to that.
Right, because there's not really a huge need for charity in a free society, right? Everybody can take care of themselves. And the people who aren't taking care of themselves, the, you know, old widows or something, the rest of us can take care of them very, very easily because of the massive, massive amount of wealth in society. Whereas if you live in a poverty-stricken society where 10 or 20 or 30% of people survive on charity, then charity becomes much more difficult and a much more strained situation. However, charity is a very easy situation in an extremely wealthy society with very few poor people. So basically, Ari, I guess my closing statement on charity should be something like this. If you're worried about charity, then just move towards an objectivist society and you won't have to worry about so much anymore.
And here's another type of, this is a difficult case, and this one will be very controversial. Now, and this pertains to respecting others' rights. Right? It's very obvious why I, as an egoist, would want all of you to respect my rights, and not try to force me, not try to take my stuff, etc. It's a little bit less obvious why the egoist would want to respect everyone else's rights.
How about because you want them to respect your rights and there's more of them than you? How about that? What if it's not a floating rationalistic reason out there in some vacuum? What if it's just hard knuckles in your face reality? What if what if you don't want to make an enemy of everybody because you don't want everybody to be your enemy? What if it's as easy and simple as that? He's going to have to look for some sort of far-off Platonic principle or something to answer his question. Ari, it's not that complicated. You respect other people's rights because you don't want them to come after you.
Now, I do think that Rand's case is a lot subtler than she often gets credit for. So I'm arguing that she makes some very strong arguments that when you live in a society of generally rights respecting behavior, it really is in your interest to respect others' rights. Unfortunately, we don't always find ourselves in that context. So here's just an example I mentioned in the book. What about slavery before the Civil War in the American South? Let's say you were born into a slaveholding family. Your family has held slaves for however long, right?
All right, I just have to say that this is a very strange way to look at the objectivist ethics, right? Well, let's say you were a slaveholder as an objectivist. Ari, are you pointing out what's wrong with Ayn Rand's objectivist ethics? Because that's a really stupid base assumption to start with.
You were up to inherit the plantation, along with all the slaves, along with all the debts of the plantation. And not only that, but where you live, it's actually illegal for you to free your slaves. Those laws actually existed in parts of the American South. So let's say you could peer back, speak back in time as an objectivist to this person.
Great, so we have to use a time machine for his analysis, but there you are. You've inherited your slaves, and it's illegal to sell them.
What would be your case to this person? Look, you should act egoistically, pursue your own survival and resulting happiness. And therefore, you should free your slaves in the conditions that you're in. I'm going to suggest that that's a difficult case to make. Now, again, I'm sure that objectivists will try. There's some plausible arguments they can pursue, or at least they can start.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just mention real quick here, as an aside, Thomas Jefferson's slaves really respected him. And he did certain things with his slaves, like he gave red overalls to the best ones, the ones that helped out the most and were smartest and most productive and stuff. And he allowed reading and stuff. And I mean, he was, by all indications, his slaves loved him. All right, they loved him. Okay, and it was a tragedy when he died. They were sold off. Families were broken up. Terrible things happened. And if he would have lived another 10 years, they would have been happy another 10 years. So, and he was, he could have freed his slaves. He would have been broke, and he would have thrown him and his family into utter destitution. And he would have embarrassed himself in front of all society, and nobody would have had any respect for him. And probably wouldn't have been able to get any charity. So it would basically be suicide. But Thomas Jefferson did something that ended up freeing the slaves. So if you look at it like that, you do have to respect the man, because not very many slaveholders did something that ended up freeing the slaves. Now, can we apply objectivist ethics to owning slaves? Only if you make up a fantasy, bizarre situation where we use a time machine. And then, I'm not sure if you're criticizing Ayn Rand's objectivist ethics. I think you're making up fantasy time machine things.
Start out plausibly, but I don't think ultimately they're going to be able to make a strong case to that person that they should free their slaves. Even though I think Rand herself would probably say, yeah, you should fully free your slaves. And I think most people who are objectivists would say, yeah, you should free your slaves. Even though they would try to argue, well, there's going to be these subtle benefits, even though you're going to lose your livelihood, you're going to run into trouble with the authorities.
Owning slaves makes you a base human. It debases your soul. And certainly, if you put it to me, I would say, yeah, you should free your slaves. Now, is it your right to throw all of your children, your wife, and throw all of your children into poverty, into utter poverty? How good would it be to let those blacks off of his plantation, on which they were supposedly happy, from what I've read, and say, you're free, go now into a racist society that has segregation and laws against you being near whites and etc. I don't know how. So first of all, it's a bad, stupid situation to get in a time machine and go look at this stuff anyway. But secondly, even if we do, it's not that clear that freeing your slaves is that much of a of a help to them. Maybe being a good slave owner is the best thing you could do in a racist society where they're going to abuse and hate and maybe even go so far as to lynch your slaves when you free them, right? So maybe, maybe if we look at it in the context of the situation and not try to use platonic floating abstractions, that would be more informative. But definitely using a time machine to think about objectivist ethics is very, very strange, Ari.
But I would say, I mean, at this point, you could get into a lot of detail, but I'll just say, let me put the onus of proof onto the objectivists, and let's see how they can make that case. I think it's impossible. So again, these are just some highlights of the sorts of arguments I make throughout the course of the book. There's others, like I talk about the infamous indestructible robot, which Rand talked about in her essay. Because by the reaction, it's not infamous at all. Anyway, she talks about a robot, I promise. But that'll just give you a flavor for the sorts of criticisms I'm making. So to conclude, I think that Ayn Rand gets a whole lot right, more than almost any of her critics recognize. In fact, in my first chapter, I go through some typical examples of some of the criticisms that people make against her. And usually in the popular press, what people say about Rand is just ridiculous. It's just wildly inaccurate presentation of her idea. So I try to be
sort of like what we've been seeing here, Ari. I mean, holy moly.
Sensitive to this fact that Rand is very often misrepresented. So I'm arguing, I'm trying to give Rand her due here and say she gets a whole lot right. She gets a lot right about ethics. She gets a lot right about many other topics that are very important. But I do come to the conclusion that her meta-ethics is basically wrong. And with that, I'm fine to open it for questions.
All right, there we go. Now, I think I can keep going. Actually, I'm not used to the fact that I don't have to stop for time limits when I'm streaming. I can just keep going. Pardon me.
Individualist, working for his own survival, as slaves, why would he free them? And I get from your argument that you're saying, if he follows the pure survivalist instinct, that he would not have any reason to free the slaves, because that would be self-sacrificial.
That's my claim, yes. Okay. Did everybody hear the question? I don't know. I'm mic'd up, everybody else is. Yeah, that's what I think is the case.
All right, great. That's what I thought you meant for this one question.
And just incidentally, I mean, I hope that even people who think that I'm just dreadfully wrong about Rand still find the book interesting, because I tried really hard to dig into Rand's arguments, and especially that's my longest chapter, the one on rights. And I try really hard to do my best to present the strongest case that I can from Rand's perspective. And I think I get into a lot of details on that and other issues that even defenders of objectivism often gloss over and don't get into. So.
All right, so I just want to see if I can hear exactly what she said there. I think she said, excuse me, that slave owners shouldn't free his slaves because it would be in his own self-interest not to.
Self-sacrificial.
It would be self-sacrificial to free the slaves. And you wouldn't want to sacrifice your own happiness, therefore keep a whole bunch of slaves just for your happiness. Well, let's look at the exact situation, but there were definitely people who freed their slaves, weren't there? It was definitely a thing, wasn't it?
My claim, yes. Did everybody hear the question? I don't know. I'm mic'd up, everybody else is.
And there were definitely people who talked about how it brutalized people, and there were certainly people who realized that it brutalized people, and so there were people who freed their slaves. So we could we definitely make the case that that it would make you a happier person to not own other people. You yourself gain your own freedom when you're not afraid for your life every day.
Yeah, that's what I think is the case.
All right, great. That's what I thought you meant.
And just incidentally, I mean, I hope that even people who think that I'm just dreadfully wrong about Rand still find the book interesting, because I tried really hard to dig into Rand's arguments, and especially that's my longest chapter, the one on rights. And I try really hard to do my best to present the strongest case that I can from Rand's perspective. And I think I get into a lot of details on that and other issues that even defenders of objectivism often gloss over and don't get into. So.
I've read your book twice already, Ari, as you know.
You're half my reading on it.
Before I get to my question, let me just say that I am a long-time student of Rand. I like to think I've lived my life consistent with what I've learned from her. And let me say, though I disagree with Ari's thesis, I think everybody that is interested in Rand should buy this book and read it. Because, it's, as I've said to you before, it's scholarly, it's respectful, and it's a work that adds to the body of what surrounds her work. So I would urge, get your own copy. My question.
Thank you. I agree. You should get your own copy.
What motivated you to write?
So the question is, what motivated me to write it? Well, I've been thinking about this for a long, long time, and I've gone back and forth to a certain degree. But the main thing is, I wanted to figure out what the truth is. So after being persuaded by something for a long time, and then you start to have doubts about it, I mean, to me, I either needed to figure out why I was having doubts, why my doubts were unfounded, or what's actually wrong with it, and then what do I think the truth is? So, that's basically it, to get to the truth. And so, but I will mention, some objectivists seem to think that it should be really important that I am able to persuade them. And so I hear comments like, well, I'm not going to find this persuasive, so I'm not even going to know what I'm saying. It's like, my motivation is not really to persuade objectivists. For one thing, I don't think I'm going to persuade hardly any objectivists that I write about this. I think that there are some people that I will persuade, but I'm mainly arguing, I'm trying to raise the arguments with objectivists. But I think there are a lot of people who have heard of Rand or interested in Rand. I think they'll be more open to persuasion if they're not strongly committed already. So I do hope, no, but I also think that I think it's true. I think a lot of people get hung up on Rand's ideas generally because they get hung up on some of these big problems. They get hung up on selfishness, obviously. And in a certain respect, I agree with Rand on the selfishness in a certain respect. But my hope is that by laying out some of these ideas and this criticism of Rand's theory and pointing to a slightly different direction, which in my last chapter, I think Rand actually heads in a little different direction before she changes course, in a direction that I basically agree with. You can read that if you want and see if you agree with my take. But I think that it's actually will make where Rand goes right. I think those ideas will be more appealing to people generally if we can talk about where did she go wrong, and maybe we need to fix this here, in these certain areas. Then we can be more, people may be more open to seeing where did she go right. Because
I'm only in favor of that, Ari. I like your process. Go ahead and do it. I'm in favor of that only because I want more people talking about Rand, and I want more people doing whatever they want with Rand, criticizing her or whatever. But as long as we're talking about her, I don't mind if you criticize her because then I can make fun of you, and then you look stupid, and Ayn Rand's gonna look good all the way. So I kind of like his idea here. Let's talk about Ayn Rand. Bring it out. Everybody have your say. Everybody have your stab at him. And then once they've had their public stab at him, we can go back and tell those people what's going on.
Because Rand makes mistakes doesn't mean she's wrong about everything. And just because people are very often, they basically misunderstand what Rand is about. Obviously, it doesn't prove anything. So part of the goal is just, hey, what does Rand actually think? And then where does she go right, where does she go wrong? So I guess the motive is, primarily I want to know what the truth is as well as I can get there. And then hopefully I'll help the discussion surrounding Rand's ideas, help further that along.
Who else has a question?
Not really related to directly what you're saying, but I'm curious. Look at my just I'm curious if you've heard of the theory of a type of economy known as a gift economy, which is what primitive societies have before they start trading with each other. I think it explains a lot of the sort of traditional ethical systems that we have that Rand is trying to critique and address.
Yeah, I don't have a comment about that specifically, but you might have gotten the idea. I'm a lot more interested in evolutionary biology than Rand was. Rand was basically not interested. She basically said, "I don't know anything about this," and that was kind of her position. But I think that there's a lot built into human dispositions from biology.
I'm curious, in Rand's body of work, was there ever a position or idea that she established, but then at a later date revised or changed? Is it something along what you're doing? Say, either I found additional information, make you think differently, and would that add credence to what you're doing?
I don't think that would add. So the question is, did Rand ever change her mind?
Yes.
And I think that's important to answer because people try to make Rand out to be this dogmatist who was always right and never changed. But the fact that she did change her mind over the years, she talked about that in certain ways. And I would think the biggest way she changed her mind is she started out as an individualist. Remember, she grew up in Russia, right? So she was very much, early on, she was very much attracted to the rhetoric of Nietzsche. And you can debate how much the actual ideas influenced her, but certainly she sounded a lot more Nietzschean in her early years than she did in her later years. And she came to explicitly reject Nietzsche's ideas for specific reasons. So that would be obvious. To me, that's the most obvious way that she changed over time. She became, she basically moved consistently toward an objective ethics, and not something based on wind emotion, the strong man, power of the strong man, nothing like that. She moved very much away from that. It took her time to develop it.
Crazy.
Which one?
The handsome one.
That's pretty bad.
Oh, your brothers. That's right. I forgot.
One mom life.
Okay, and I'm going, what if land were born in Westchester County and had a nice separation? How much, of her life is to reflect against, Bolshevism and ruining her life? And so what would she have been without that point?
Yeah, I think it's impossible to say where Rand would have been if she hadn't been born and raised and witnessed the Russian Revolution. Obviously, it had a big impact on her life. Like, she really reacted extremely strongly to communism. She always hated communists. But, well, you say that, right? But let's not forget, there were a lot of Americans who went over to visit the Soviet Union and who thought it was a wonderful experience, right? There were people who had that upbringing, like similar to what you mentioned, who actually thought communism was wonderful. And Rand later met her sister. Her sister was able to come over. I can't remember if she went back or I can't remember the details. But her sister very much had different ideas. It was nowhere nearly as critical of the Soviet regime. And so, yeah, in a way, it was profoundly influential for her. But in another way, it's not like what formed her views. She formed her views in that context, but she formed her views based on her own thinking of who she was and so on.
Well, good. I'm glad he doesn't buy into the determinism thing, because based on his analysis of insects in ethics earlier, I would think that he would be just the type of guy who would say, yeah, the reason she hated collectivism so much is because she came from Russia during the revolution and so on. So, Ari, good job in recognizing that and succinctly recognizing it, which not a lot of people do. A lot of people buy the determinism jig.
So, Ari, I didn't read all of Atlas Shrugged. In one part, I know.
You do run it.
I listened to the abridged version that is on audiobooks or something like that. And so one part that's missing from that actually is the kidnapping. That's not in the abridged version that's on audiobooks. So I hadn't heard about that, but I'm curious. I know that Ayn Rand took her characters very seriously, and especially Jean Gall, like that was her epoch of man inclusive of women too. But do you think that she was being literal with the decision that he had to make between sacrificing himself, or do you think that was more of a dramatic twist because it's a novel after all? Do you really think that she was trying to say that what man should be is somebody that does want to sacrifice for their loved one?
Well, Rand is perfectly serious that in that context, if that were real life, John Gall would have committed suicide. Rand would certainly not have said that that was counted as a sacrifice. Right? She would have said it's perfectly self-interested to commit suicide in those contexts because it was for his values. And there's more about suicide. So Leonard Peikoff has an example of suicide. Leonard Peikoff has the book Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, which remains, this came out in '91, I think, but it remains the best, most comprehensive presentation of Rand. Peikoff worked with, he was Rand's close associate. This is just a brief note about that. So he spent countless hours discussing Rand's ideas with Rand. So I regard that book as an accurate presentation of ideas. Anyway, he has an example of suicide and said it would be perfectly fine to commit suicide in certain contexts. So another big example, if you have a debilitating, horrible terminal illness, can be okay, morally okay, and you can commit suicide. And there's other examples. Another character now.
MrCropper fears Larkin Rose. Who's Larkin Rose, guys?
And
who's Larkin Rose?
We're as readers, we think, well, Cheryl, it's extremely tragic, and if she had been able to think about things from better or broader perspective, she would not and should not have done that. But from her own perspective, it's very understandable within the context of it. So Yeah, she's dead serious. In certain contexts, suicide can be, rational and in your own interests.
I don't have a question, I have an opinion.
Are we going to do opinions now? Are we going to
I have one
questions?
more question.
Well, let's do the one more question first.
When will the audiobook come out? Read by the author.
Yeah. Well,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a fantastic question period. I've been sitting here waiting for something to happen too long. I'm gonna watch that later, and if there's anything juicy, I'm gonna just do another video on it. But right now, just for fun, you guys are talking about Larkin Rose. I'm just gonna go over here and check out Larkin Rose before we. Yeah, we do flatter the people who criticize Rand by giving them any attention, but you know, I'm torn between giving them attention and tearing them down, or not giving them attention and tearing them down. Invest in anarchy. All right. I fear this guy. Pack mentality. Tool of tyrants. Cultural narcissism. What's good here? He's awful. He got owned by Lauren Southern. Did he? He's that bad, huh? She could own him. She's good. She's hot. Voting. Same old shell game. You don't want voting? I say don't vote. It encourages the bastards. That's what H.L. Mencken said. What anarchy isn't? Anarchizona? All right, well, maybe I'll have to check out this guy. I fear him, huh? Yeah, lefty philosophy's got IQ of a mayonnaise jar. I should watch whose debate? Lauren Southern and this guy? Is it on his own channel? Larkin Rose, Lauren Southern. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh my God, Disenthrall has an analysis of it. Disenthrall, you're such an idiot. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I risk polluting the video on Ari, so we better call it quits for this. Thank you for joining me. We will see you on the interwebs for more fun in the future.